So you got a drone and now you're wondering, how do you get that crispy cinematic looking footage? Well, stick around because in this video, I'm gonna go over 5 tips on how you can get drone footage that make people go,
"That was so awesome."
That was awesome.
Okay, so all of that footage was recorded on my DJI Mavic Air drone, and let me just tell you, this thing has completely changed the game for me. It has added a level of creativity that I've never had before, and honestly, I think it's made my videos 100 times better. And you can no doubt take this thing straight out of the box, put it up in the sky, and you will instantly get some good results. However, I've definitely found that after several months now of owning this thing, that there are definitely a few techniques that will help you get the most cinematic footage possible. So I have 5 tips, and my first one is shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second. Now, I will say that for me personally, I've never been a huge 4K guy. I've never necessarily thought that I needed 4K until I got this thing. I think the 4K footage out of this camera looks so stinking good, and especially when I downscale it into 1080, the footage honestly just looks unreal to me. And I specifically shoot in 30 frames per second because it allows me in post-production to drop the speed of it to 80%. Now, that's not true slow motion, but dropping 30 frames per second down 80%, it gives it this kind of dreamy, cool looking image that, in my opinion, looks ultra cinematic. So try it out, start shooting in 30 frames per second. I honestly think it'll make a big difference in all of your videos. So tip number 2 is ND filters. Let me just say right now, if you're not using ND filters, ND filters are so important. And if you don't know what those are, basically an ND filter acts like a pair of sunglasses that you put on top of your lens. And the reason that this is really important, especially for video, is that it allows you to keep your shutter speed at the right amount. When shooting video on either a camera or a drone, you always want your shutter speed to be double your frame rate. So for example, if I'm shooting in 30 frames per second, I want my shutter speed to be at 60. If I'm shooting at 60 frames per second, I want my shutter to be at 120, so on and so forth. This gives you a really cinematic looking image, and shooting your shutter speed at double your frame rate, what it does is it allows in the right amount of motion blur. For example, if you just increase your shutter speed all the way up to where your exposure looks right, what's gonna happen is that your image is gonna look really choppy. There's gonna be virtually no motion blur, and your video honestly is just gonna not look very good, and people who know what they're looking for are gonna be able to tell right away. Usually I would never want to tell somebody that you need a specific type of equipment, but honestly, when it comes to shooting video, you need ND filters. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily need to get the most expensive ones. You just need to get good quality ones that are gonna last you a long time. Tip number 3 is 3 directional movements. Now, I don't know if that's the official term for this, but when I say 3 directional movement, what I mean by that is that when you're flying your drone, you're actually going in 3 separate directions at the same time. So obviously your drone can move up and down, it can move right or left, but then also you can control the camera inside of the gimbal to make that go up or down. So for example, you could be flying up, you could be flying to the right, And at the same time, your camera, you can start tilting it down. So now you have 3 different directions that your drone is moving. And what this does is it creates a really interesting image. And we all know that when we're shooting video, the most important thing is that we keep our viewer engaged and captivated. And by doing this, you're gonna create a lot of movement and a lot of dynamic into your video that maybe you didn't have before. Now, there are definitely some times when 3 directional movements are just way too hard. Maybe you're shooting in some crazy winds or it's just a little sketchy out there. I would say you don't always need 3, but you definitely need a minimum of 2. If your only shot is one direction, then that'll be fine for a couple shots, but after a while, that's gonna get really static and honestly, just really boring. Okay, so tip number 4 is the time of day. I'm not gonna spend too much time on this because I think most of us know that the best time to shoot video or photo for that matter is golden hour. And if you don't know what golden hour is, it is the time directly after sunrise or directly before sunset. And the reason it's called golden hour is because the sun is pretty low in the sky and it casts off this really beautiful golden like glow out in the sky, and it makes everything look so much better. You could shoot at the exact same location for sunset and then shoot at the exact same location like in the middle of the day around 1 or 2 p.m. and your footage at sunset, I promise you, will look so much better. So if you have the ability to plan your day, I will always recommend shoot at sunrise or shoot at sunset. It will make your videos so much better. Okay, my 5th and final tip for you is be prepared. Now I know that's not the most exciting tip, but it might be the most important. I'll be honest, when I first got my drone, it was really intimidating. I've never had one before, I never flew one before, and so when I first got it, I honestly, at times, was a little overwhelmed with just the operating system and the configuration of everything. And so my first several times flying my drone, I honestly had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to change my settings. I had a lot to learn, needless to say. And these drone batteries, they're not that good. You have maybe about 20 minutes of actual fly time before you have to come back and land the thing. And so the last thing that you want to do is be at a really cool location and think that you're about to capture this amazing perspective to your video. You send your drone up in the sky and you waste your entire battery because you don't know how to switch over and start recording on the internal storage because you didn't check your SD card and now you have no room to record anything. Or you're at a really cool location and you've never even practiced flying your drone before, and so you think you're gonna get a cool shot and you end up crashing into a tree. So trust me when I say be prepared, go over all your settings, learn how to fly your drone, practice a bunch, and I can guarantee you, if you are prepared, when you get up in the sky, you're going to have the ability to capture some amazing cinematic looking footage. All right, that's all I've got for you guys. Those are my 5 tips to help get the most out of your drone footage. I really hope this helps you, and I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.